Hello, OTCers, and welcome to Monday. Now, no men's football at last, with the Club World Cup having finished. We're not quite going to count the Champions League qualifiers just yet. You can hear a little bit about them on OTC, the podcast, I'm sure. But we love to go big on a Monday here on YouTube. And so we're going to start with Napoli and their super aggressive transfer window, which really is starting to take shape and really says that the Serie A champions mean it in terms of defending their crown properly this year. And if you're asking why that is, two words: Antonio Conte. Now, when he was taking over at about this time last year, we wondered how much mileage there would really be in the relationship between the club president, Aurelio De Laurentiis, who's got such a long and important history there, and Antonio Conte, who is there for a good time, not a long time, very demanding, and therefore that means there's often a quite short shelf life to his spells in charge of clubs. He's left most of his clubs in relatively acrimonious ways, and it looked as if he and Napoli would part ways after just that one season. Now, I went to see Napoli in the flesh last season for the first time in about October. They beat struggling Lecce 1-0. And it was classic Conte. Get it done, no matter what the aesthetic cost. And it was clear to me at that point, even though Conte was playing down their ambitions of winning Serie A, that he was in it to win it, as he always is. Now, of course, he had that extra space because they didn't have European football. And so if they were going to be in a position to defend that title this season, they needed to re-up the squad. Now, this is where the initial fracture between De Laurentiis and Conte became clear only in the home straight of last season, which was a surprise to lots of us who thought that it was a house built on sand, because De Laurentiis is of course, has his film background, so he's quite theatrical. But on the other hand, he's always got his hand on the till. And because of the place that he picked up Napoli in, at dire financial straits, he's always played quite a straight bat and been very, very careful in terms of how they've spent money. Antonio Conte is someone who just wants what he wants, and we know that from Juventus, we know that from Chelsea, we know that from everywhere that he's been, really. And so you just wondered how long it would take to break apart. Now, the thing that really caused the fracture was the departure of Khvisha Kvaratskhelia. Now, we'll come back to that in a minute, because I think it was one of those rare moves that worked for all parties. And Napoli got their money. They went on to win Serie A anyway. And, of course, he's proved to be an absolute superstar for Paris Saint-Germain and had a huge part in their treble win last season. And people have, since he's been at PSG, started to appreciate him on a completely new level, really locking into what he does off the ball and what he's always done off the ball. He's always had incredible defensive numbers since he's been in the big European leagues. But I think for Napoli to go out there now, they persuaded Conte to stay at the end of last season, surprisingly, because I think you looked at the quite lukewarm embrace between De Laurentiis and Napoli on the day that they won the title. And you thought, OK, well, this is it. He's had his one season there. It's been great. And now it's all over. And we wonder who's next. And yeah, about a week afterwards, they announced that Antonio Conte was staying. And if he was staying, it had to be for a reason. He's always ambitious. He's always demanding to a fault. And so De Laurentiis had to have promised him something. Now, we found out kind of what it was quite quickly, because it became clear quite quickly that they were going to sign Kevin De Bruyne once he left Manchester City. And that's a huge statement of intent. You can see De Bruyne coming into this team and really dominating Serie A. He's exactly the sort of player I think I can see fitting into a Conte team, because he's not just a playmaker par excellence, he's quite a physical playmaker. That's why he adapted to the Premier League so quickly and so well, even if he doesn't quite have the pace that he did when he arrived from Wolfsburg to Manchester City. There's still a sense that he's going through the gears when he's playing, and of course he has that incredible range of passing, which would be a great addition to this Napoli midfield, which was, I think it's fair to say, without criticising Anguissa or McTominay or Lobotka, all three of whom were brilliant last season, it can often be more graft than craft. So there's definitely another side to Napoli's game that I'm expecting to come out this season with KDB, even if he was a little bit shocked and went even redder in the face than he normally does when he picked up his training jersey and it had Diego Maradona's number 10 in it. Don't worry, he's not going to be wearing that once the games actually start. That's going to stay retired for the Serie A and the Champions League and the Coppa Italia games. But I think you're seeing now, after the signing of De Bruyne, more and more signings come as well. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, De Laurentiis' promise to Conte, which is pretty clear. Secondly, they know they're going to need this squad to really flesh things out this season if they're going to be able to compete to a good level in the Champions League as well. Of course, they've got those 2 extra matches, something that Napoli have never been through before, even though some teams went through that for the first time last season. And also, I do feel that KDB is kind of like a bat sign over Europe to say, look, we're serious. If this guy's coming here, he's not coming out here to play a nice retirement. I know a lot has been made of the fact that he and his wife got married down the road in Sorrento, and it's a beautiful part of the world and very important to them. Look, if you're going to Napoli, you're not going for an easy life. It's a pressured atmosphere where the fans give everything and they expect the team to give everything as well. So it's clear that when we see the signings of Noa Lang, of Sam Beukema, who was their key defensive target, who's joined from the Coppa winners, Bologna. Lorenzo Luca, who's the centre forward, they decided to sign from Udinese when they decided that Darwin Nunez was just too expensive and Liverpool were asking too much. It's clear that we're looking at a team with a future. Now, I think you look at the ages of these guys, of course, Beukema and Lang are 26, Luca 24. So these are players that I guess De Laurentiis could sell to himself as players that maybe if they need to sell later down the line, if they need to flip them for a few extra euros, they could do. They've got the option of doing that if they need to. But also they've got players who are going to be important for the here and now. Now, Lang, I think, is one worth focusing on because he's the de facto replacement for Kvisha Kvaratskhelia. Now, look, that seems like an absolutely massive task, and it probably seems like a bigger task now than it did in January because in the first half of last season, Kvaratskhelia did a very good job in terms of working to the extent that Antonio Conte wanted, but it wasn't his most dazzling season. It didn't feel like they were going to miss him in an attacking sense. And even though they couldn't really find a replacement, of course, they had deals for Alejandro Garnacho fall through. Maybe that will be revived because they're definitely looking for a second winger. So Manchester United fans, maybe keep your eye on that. And at the end of the window, of course, they were looking at Alan Saint-Maximin, maybe getting him on loan when it wasn't really working out for him at Fenerbahce. Nothing happened, much to the annoyance of Conte. So I feel even though Lang isn't the most superstar name, after Kevin De Bruyne, he is a really important one because he is a player in the position that Conte said, give me something good. Now, Lang is someone who has got a huge task ahead of him, although when he gave his introductory press conference, it was pretty clear that he believes in himself, as he always does, to replace Kvaratskhelia to a good level. He's really progressed from his time at Club Brugge. He was great for PSV. Someone who's cheeky, who's got a lot of talent, which will, I think, really excite the fans as well. And when we're talking about signings that excite the fans, we talked about KDB. I think Noa Lang will do exactly the same. He's a little more mature now at 26, so I think he can make good on that promise and consistently compete at elite level. Luca, I think, will turn into something really interesting as well. It means there's not so much pressure on Romelu Lukaku to play every game. It's clear that he's been creaking a little bit physically over the last couple of years, even though he has that brilliant relationship with Conte. So Luca will be important too. And they definitely needed reinforcement in defence when Buongiorno was missing through injury last season. It wasn't quite the same at the back, so Beukema, a fellow Dutchman to Noa Lang, will be important for them. And I guess we have to look at not just pleasing Conte, but De Laurentiis doing what's the right thing for the club, which he always has done in his view. Now, look, I know people think he's a bit tight, like I said, because of the position which he picked up Napoli in, I think you can understand why he's a little bit parsimonious. But I think he realised he went too far in that direction when Napoli last won the league in 2023. And what Napoli are really trying to avoid is a repeat of 2023, when the fact that De Laurentiis wasn't quick enough to reward Luciano Spalletti, just triggered the extra year on his contract rather than offering him a new contract as a reward for that surprise Scudetto, because he was slow in re-upping Kvaratskhelia. Those created little ticking time bombs, and the way they treated Osimhen as well. Those two players, of course, were the key, along with the coach, in winning that title in 2023, and he managed to knock all their noses out of joint. When Spalletti went, he went cheap, really, in appointing Rudy Garcia, something that he publicly accepted was a mistake quite soon afterwards. And then they ended up with a 4-coach season and finishing 10th in the league, despite the fact that Osimhen scored 15 goals, which everyone seems to forget, by the way. And Kvaratskhelia had his moments, even though he started the season injured. So I think in terms of depth, in terms of investing in players that can give Napoli something now, but also represent money in the bank, it feels like De Laurentiis is selling himself something in terms of, I suppose, a compromise in his brain, something that he feels is reasonably good value, but can actually do something for the team now, which is what Conte wants. So when we've talked all along about this relationship between De Laurentiis and Conte being a doomed relationship, maybe that's not the case. Maybe Conte needs the reign that's put on him by De Laurentiis, and maybe De Laurentiis needs someone like Conte around to make him a little bit more daring, to bring him out of his comfort zone as well. You know, he's the boss, he's used to calling all the shots. But this is something that I think will be for the good of Napoli. And it's not just about not repeating 2023 and having a better title defence and being a genuine competitor to win the Scudetto for the second season in a row. Of course, something that Napoli have never done. They've never won the Scudetto 2 seasons in a row. Only won it 4 times in their history, and 2 in the last 3 is their only 2 post-Maradona. I think it's the fact that they can probably look up north and see what's happening with Inter at the moment. Now, if you're a regular listener to OTC The Pod, you'll have heard me and Dotton and Nikki Bandini, our brilliant Serie A expert, when she's on, talk about the fact that we have believed all the way through last season that Inter were the best team in Serie A, that it was just a matter of time that they were going to really grab the league and run with it. And they never did. Of course, they missed huge opportunities, most notably in the penultimate game of the season at Lazio, where they conceded that penalty to Pedro right at the end. But there were loads of others. You know, they played Milan 5 times last season in all competitions and didn't beat them once, despite being so much better than them, and Milan having a really off season. So I think the fact that Inter ran aground so dramatically in the Champions League final has probably made a few eyebrows perk up in Naples, because you look at that, the sight of a team not just being beaten by a superior team, but the wheels completely falling off, this sense of them having no more to give, of them running out of road. And they looked tired in the back end of last season anyway, even with that great squad, which perhaps in terms of depth was not quite as great as we imagined. Mehdi Taremi wasn't really able to contribute. Marko Arnautovic wasn't really up to mustard. Of course, one of those has left the club, and one of those is probably going to leave the club in the near future. Taremi might end up in the Premier League in the next couple of weeks or next month. So I think with everything going on at Inter, and of course the fallout between Lautaro and Çalhanoğlu, we'll see how that falls out. The departure of Simone Inzaghi to be replaced by Christian Kivu, who's someone who knows the club brilliantly, but of course is a relatively inexperienced coach at top level. I think if you're Napoli, you're looking at this and you're thinking, we have got a great opportunity. We may have dug in and made sure we won the league, even though we weren't the best team in it last season. But we can become the best team in it this season. We can become the best squad this season. Because you look at not only Inter, Juventus are in a state of flux. Roma have got a new coach, but they still have their financial challenges. And I wouldn't really see them quite as a title contender just yet. Atalanta have had a couple of departures, and they're going to have a couple more departures in the post-Gasperini era and Milan just gradually rebuilding. And to me, it seems like a massive leap to say they're going to be anywhere near the Scudetto. So if you're Napoli, whether you're one of the players, whether you're Conte, whether you're De Laurentiis, you're thinking, this is our time. And we're going to grasp it with both hands. And that's why they're going to have this big transfer window. So like I said, it's not over yet, despite those excellent signings with KDB leading the way. I think another winger is on the way. Now that it seems they've got a bit of English competition from Beukema's old teammate from Bologna, Dan Ndoye, who has been brilliant really for Bologna over the last couple of years. So maybe him, maybe Garnacho, maybe someone else. A few names I expect will be cleared out as well. But where does it look like just a one and done for Conte last season? What if it turned out to be a little mini dynasty? Let's wait and see. Thanks for joining us, as I hope you do every Monday here on YouTube on the Continent channel. Remember, the podcast is available every Thursday and Friday. Me, Dotton, and one of our brilliant guests talking about the major subjects happening in European football every Thursday, and every Friday Ask OTC, where we answer your questions. So below the line, please, or get at us on the socials. We will see you back here next Monday.